Ugh. Are you sure? I mean, it's not very good, is it? Why are you trying to be a filmmaker? You're not very good at it. Oi, settle down, mate. I think it's alright. I think you just need to take a break. Why don't you do it tomorrow? Just put it off for a day. What's one more day? There are so many more talented filmmakers out there, with more important stories to tell. I reckon you gotta get that new camera, and then your work will be amazing. Your life is so boring. Don't waste people's time and energy. You just need the right idea, and then you'll have the energy to make it happen. Nobody cares about your work. Just go for a walk, and wait for inspiration to strike. You know people think you're a loser, right? You should watch some more video essays. The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. It's a book that I keep coming back to every time I'm in a creative slump or struggling with some kind of block. In this video, I'll break down some of the key concepts as I understand them, and hopefully it'll help you if you're in a similar spot right now. Part 1. Resistance. Defining the enemy. The first part of The War of Art is all about naming and defining this force that Pressfield calls resistance. Resistance is basically anything that holds you back from things you really want to do but that you're struggling to do. This could be a creative endeavor like writing or music or painting, or it could be starting your new business, or it could even be a new diet or health and fitness plan. And it's not just about individualistic goals that we have for ourselves. All of this also applies to communal or community-based projects. Resistance might be holding you back from not only writing your novel, but also making content about political issues that are affecting your community or local volunteering opportunities. In the context of this channel, our creative endeavors are all about becoming better indie filmmakers with the hopes that one day we can get paid the big bucks to tell the stories that we want to tell. So resistance is anything that blocks us from sitting down to write our scripts or edit our films or prep for shoots. Resistance can take many different forms. I'll list some of the most common ones that Pressfield talks about. Resistance is self-doubt. You doubt anything and everything to do with the task, so you don't do it. Are you sure? I mean, it's not very good, is it? Resistance is fear. You're scared of the outcome, so you don't do it. You know people think you're a loser, right? Resistance is victimhood. You convince yourselves why you're the victim of the situation and why there are all these different reasons why you shouldn't do it, so you don't do it. There are so many more talented filmmakers out there, with more important stories to tell. Resistance also takes on less intense feelings. Probably the most common manifestation of resistance is procrastination. You don't tell yourself that you're not going to do it, you'll just do it tomorrow. Why don't you do it tomorrow? Just put it off for a day. What's one more day? Resistance is also rationalization. You convince yourself that you just need that new lens to film beautiful shots, or you desperately have to have a new pen and notebook to write good scripts. I reckon you gotta get that new camera, and then your work will be amazing. So as you can see, there are many different forms of resistance, and you might think that it's not all one force. It's actually a bunch of different problems, and that's fair. But I think one of the most valuable things from this book is the provocation to think about it as one force, almost like an evil demon that'll use any weapon it can to stop you from doing your thing. If you accept this provocation and try to start identifying resistance in your life, you'll start to see it pop up everywhere. But then what do you do about it? This is where part 2 of the book comes in. Part 2. Combating resistance. Turning pro. The second part of The War of Art breaks down how to actually combat resistance. Pressfield's solution when it comes to dealing with resistance is to turn pro. In the book, he makes a really clear distinction between professionals on one hand and amateurs on the other. The difference is all in your mindset and how you actually approach the work. A professional approaches the work how all of us might actually approach our real jobs. I'll list some of the key differences between professionals and amateurs. A professional shows up every day, no matter how they feel. An amateur shows up only when they feel like it. Professionals will stay on the job all day, and amateurs will give up when it gets really hard. Professionals are committed to the long term, and amateurs are not. Professionals don't over-identify with their work. Amateurs over-identify with their work. Those are just some of the key differences, but you can see how professionals will treat their work exactly how we might treat our real jobs. When I worked as a cinema manager or a retail salesman, I was a professional in those contexts. I showed up for every shift, whether I felt like it or not. I stayed till the end of my shifts, no matter what. I was committed to the job over the long term, and yet I didn't over-identify with the job. Managing a cinema or selling men's clothing was not a huge part of my personal identity. On the other hand, when it comes to voluntary creative endeavors like my indie filmmaking career, I'm much more of an amateur. I only really sit down to write scripts when I feel like it or when inspiration strikes. I give up pretty easily when it gets hard, I'm not committed over the long term, and I'm guilty of over-identifying myself with the idea of being an indie filmmaker, which puts way too much pressure on the work. If you have a job, you're already a pro. Pressfield's advice basically boils down to taking the mindset and the habits you have with your job and applying them to your creative endeavors. He goes into much more detail in the book about how turning pro can help to tackle each different form of resistance, and I highly recommend checking out the book if you haven't read it already. Part 3. Beyond Resistance, the Higher Realm. The third and final part of this book steps back and takes a look at the bigger picture of life beyond resistance. This section of the book gets quite abstract and woo-woo and might be off-putting for some readers. Pressfield starts talking about the spiritual side of making art, and he mentions angels and the muse and the ego and the self and the higher realm. There's this idea that Pressfield brings up which he calls the unlived life. He reckons that we all have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life, which is the version of our lives where we beat resistance and we got to do all the things that we wanted to do. This was the most valuable part of the third section of the book for me. It got me thinking a lot about regret. If we let resistance win, if we live a life where we had all these different things that we wanted to do, but we didn't because we were afraid of looking like an idiot, or we just procrastinated, then it can only fill us with a deep sense of regret, right? At the end of the day, if we let resistance win, we live a life filled with regret and missed opportunities, which sounds really dark. But if we manage to turn pro and beat resistance, we might actually get to live our unlived life. We might actually get to achieve our goals, and we might actually get to contribute to our communities in a meaningful way and maybe even make a difference. And in the wise words of the great Samwise Gamgee, that's worth fighting for. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.